Wait, before you listen to this episode, I just had to tell you about our new free mini wealth building training. In this training, we're covering the first steps to building wealth, how to find your personalized wealth path, how to find and analyze deals, and then some. So don't miss out on this free training. I mean, what do you have to lose? It's free. Sign up at www.abundantculture.co/newsletter. Don't let delay get in the way of your abundant year. Now, back to the episode. This week, we're talking with an attorney all about small claims cases, like what they are, what you should be doing before, during, and after the case, and tips to avoid the legal issue in the first place. So make sure you sit down and take notes, because you never know when you're going to get sued or when you need to sue somebody. I mean, he said take it as a compliment. If you're able to get this many sales and you get one person that wants to sue you, then that kind of means that you're reaching a ton of people. I'd say that's a compliment, and so does he. So get ready to listen to and learn from our good friend, Stephen Lefkoff. Hi, Stephen, and thank you again for coming onto the Abundant Culture podcast. We are super excited to have you today because we have yet to talk about anything legal really on the podcast. So this is going to be like super duper valuable to our listeners. But before we get into like the business side of things, we have to ask you, what is your backstory? Like, how'd you even get into business?
Yeah, Jasmine, no problem. Happy to talk about that. Joseph, thank you guys for having me on the podcast first. It's a pleasure to be here. I hope I'm not one of these lawyers that bores the living crap out of your listeners. I don't think I will be, but you never know. Anyway, I am an Atlanta, Georgia-based attorney, and I've been practicing law for 10 years at a law firm here in Atlanta for the first 7 before leaving to start my own law practice. And when I did that, I started to notice something very interesting about small claims cases. And here in Georgia, those are cases that are under $15,000. And what I was noticing was that nobody knew what they were doing in small claims court. And I was going on behalf of a handful of clients that would send me to all of their cases. But so many people don't have attorneys in small claims court because, I mean, if you think about the economics, right? If you have a $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 credit card case you're being sued on, or a car repair gone bad that you're pursuing a lawsuit, or, a handful of different issues that could be coming up in your life, neighbor disputes. I mean, you name it, the small claims court handles these, but it doesn't make sense to pay an attorney the amount of your case, right? You net zero, even if you win. So a lot of people do it themselves. But the thing I was noticing was, and it makes good sense, if you do this yourself, but you've never been to law school, you've never gone to court before, you've never seen the process outside of episodes of, say, Law and Order, right, which are not accurate, then you wouldn't know what you're doing, right? You don't know how to do this. It's not something that we all just know how to do, how to pursue a lawsuit or defend a lawsuit. Yeah. And so folks were losing cases that they should win. Because they didn't bring the right witnesses. They didn't have the right evidence. They didn't know how to make a cohesive and coherent opening statement or closing argument. They didn't even know where to park. I mean, I've seen cases where people lost a case, where someone lost a case. They were in the courtroom and then had to run out to feed a meter when the judge announces their case. They're not there, and the judge would issue a judgment against them because they're not there. And then they run back into court and say, "Judge, you didn't call my case." And the judge says, "Yeah, I did. You weren't here." And they say, "I was just feeding the meter." And the judge says, "I'm sorry. The notice said 9 a.m. I got out on the bench at 9:15. You weren't here. That's 15 minutes late. I don't know what you were doing. How do I know you were here and had to go feed the meter and you weren't just late?" Right? The law doesn't allow for that. Wow. So I was noticing all this stuff, and this is a long-winded answer to get to the short business here that I created. But I recently released Gavel, powered by Small Claims Academy. And Gavel is an online program with over 70 animated video lessons to teach people, individuals and businesses, the rules, practices, procedures, tips, tricks, etc., in small claims court, so they can do their case themselves without needing an attorney.
Wow.
Nice. So then what made you like even go into law in the first place?
Oh, I love that question. So I wanted nothing to do with it. It's a funny story because I'm fortunate enough that my father is also an attorney here in Atlanta, and he does bankruptcy work. And I interned with him when I was in high school and was bored out of my mind. He would laugh if he heard this, and he probably will hear this, and I hope he does laugh. But I was bored out of my mind. Bankruptcy is a very form-driven practice. So you're just kind of filling out forms, submitting them, negotiating resolutions. Next case, fill out the form, submit it. I mean, there's not a lot of mental stimulation, let's say that, in bankruptcy cases. And so I thought that that's what lawyers did. And I said, this is boring. I don't want to do this. And I was studying abroad, actually, in London, England. And when I was there in college, the exchange rate, and I don't know what it is now, but it was terrible. So I ran out of money pretty quick, and I had to find free things to do. And back then, we had books. Like, they don't do that anymore. You have an iPhone that tells you where to go and what to do, and you can find a million, Yelp listings for free things or whatever. But back then you had your book, and in the back of the book, of course, were the free things. And one of them was to go watch a court hearing at Old Bailey, which is London's oldest courthouse. And it's like everything in England, it's a bajillion years old. And so I said, okay, a day I didn't have class. I figured I'll go do that. I have nothing else to do. And I want to see some history. And I walked into Old Bailey, and I kind of felt the gravity. I'm not a history buff, like, at all. I know some things from school, and I know some things from being alive, but I'm not somebody that like revels in history. I don't even know if that's the right word, but that's not me. So, but I was there, and I felt that kind of feeling of being in such an old place where so many amazing things had happened. And at that moment, I left that. I didn't even really know what I was watching, to be honest with you, where you're so far up in the like gallery that you can't really hear much. But I left that building, walked out of there, and said, I want to go to law school, and I want to be a lawyer. And not only do I want to be a lawyer, but I want to be, like, if you think about what we used to be called, counselors, I want to be somebody that helps people. I don't want to just be this like billboard guy that makes all kinds of, money's good. I don't mind making money, but that my goal is that the money will come if I prioritize helping people. And that's what I've done.
That's absolutely awesome. So when it came to the specific place that you're in law, what made you want to go into it? I guess with the small claims, it's like, when did you realize that you really wanted to get into small claims? Like, what was that moment? Because you left this place and you realized that you wanted to get into law. You probably knew that you didn't want to do bankruptcy, but when was that? Explain that moment where it was like, oh, small claims. That's the thing.
So at the law firm where I was working right out of law school, we practiced what we called door law, or I called door law. And I've heard other people refer to it as door law. If it walks in the door, you do it. Okay. This was not limited to criminal work or injuries or breach of contract matters or business litigation or any. It was unlimited what we did. We did whatever walked in the door. And I was noticing that there would be a lot of people that would call about smaller issues. And it didn't make financial sense to help them. We couldn't get really involved in cases that were, like I said before, that just didn't meet a certain economic threshold.
Yeah.
Because you would create enemies of your clients, right? They'd pay you all this money, and then they'd never get it back. And they'd go, well, shoot, why did I pay you whatever? Let's say even $1,500, right? Why did I pay you $1,500 for a $3,000 case when I could have done that myself?
Yeah.
Right. And not paid that much money. So we weren't taking those kinds of cases. But what I saw, Joseph, was that there was a huge hole in the market for this, that it was over and over and over again. We were getting calls. I was getting calls from friends and family. I was getting calls from friends of friends. I was getting calls from old clients. I was getting calls. You name it, we got these calls. And I said, there's got to be a way to help people, that this is not fair. It's not right. And then I was in court one day, and I saw a plaintiff lose. I told you about the parking story, which is just wild, but I saw somebody actually have their case, have their day in court, and lose when they really should have won. And it was because they didn't have the documents that they needed. And then the ones that they did have, they couldn't, what we call, authenticate, meaning they were hearsay. So the judge said, I can't look at that. You don't have the person that wrote it in court with you. So we can't verify that it's authentic.
Oh, wow.
And you don't have an affidavit from that person. You don't have any of the things you need so that I can trust that what you're giving me is accurate and wasn't photoshopped or wasn't, revised, or you didn't write it yourself. And that plaintiff lost. And it was like an $8,000 case. Plaintiff was talking about how important that money was and how critical it was for their kids and for, school and all kinds. It was going on and on about the importance of it, and walked away with nothing. Wow. And I thought, my goodness, like, if we could fix that, if we could make it where, these kind of issues that, again, make perfect sense. I totally get why it happens. But if we can prevent that from happening, then we really give everybody who wants their day in court their fighting chance at success when they have that day in court. And that really became my priority.
Absolutely. So what are some of the, I guess, key things that people should know about small claims before they even go into court or and pursue a small claims case? Like, what are those key things that you want those people to kind of look out for? What is the documentation that they might want to have? Walk us through that process a little bit.
Sure. So number one is always to remember that court is a last resort. Like, I know it's something I do all the time. I know I have a product now that coaches people on how to do it, but it's not something that, hey, they didn't respond to my text message, I'm filing a lawsuit, right? It shouldn't be that way, right? Or, the mechanic, I just picked up my car and the check engine light came back on, I'm driving straight to the courthouse and filing a lawsuit, right? Like, let's be humans, okay? So number one, be a human. Okay. And when I say be a human, I mean, do everything you can to try and resolve your claim before you actually file the lawsuit. Yeah. And that, by the way, that hits to the reverse too, right? If you're a potential defendant where you might be sued, really consider setting aside ego and trying to resolve a case before the plaintiff files a lawsuit, or even after it's been filed. Don't hesitate to call and say, hey, look, I get it. You're upset. Let me see if we can work this out. I mean, just number one, be human. Number two, kind of just advice I've noticed from watching this over and over again, is try your best to keep your emotions in check when you're in court. Okay. A lot of times, small claims cases, these are huge matters for the people involved in them. I mean, the difference between, like the other case I was talking about, $8,000 and zero, that's a lot of money, right? Now, it's not the millions that you see in lawsuits that you read about in the paper or online, but it's a lot of money for people. And so it's easy to get caught up when you're in court, start crying, start screaming, pointing fingers, yelling, arguing with the judge, doing things that, because it's such an emotional thing, right, that you're doing. It's one thing about lawyers, we try and take emotion out of our job, right? We are supposed to be objective viewers of the law and let our clients be emotional, but not us. But when you're representing yourself, you don't have anyone that's not emotional because it's you, right? When you're doing this without an attorney. So that's another thing to really keep in mind, is try your best to be level-headed. Remember that the judges are, this leads me into number three, actually, and this will be, I think three's enough. You don't want me talking forever, but number three, remember that everybody there is a person. Okay. It goes back to treat humans like humans. The judge is a person. The clerk's office is staffed with people. The other side of your case, the other person that's going to be there, is a person, right? And so it benefits you to be polite, be understanding and respectful of the process. And, you keep another thing in mind. Judges, they sit on the bench 5 days a week, or if they're part-time, maybe 1 day a week or twice a month, or however, in your county it's done. But they see these cases for hours upon hours at a time. They see maybe 20 in a day. And so it's unlikely that your case is something that they've never seen before, right? Or is some particular area of law that has never been litigated before. Most of the time, these small claims cases fit into a handful of buckets, and they've seen it. And so what they want is efficiency. Present your case, make your argument. Defendant, present your case, make your argument, and then I'm going to make a decision as the judge, and I'm going to tell you what my decision is and why. And what they don't want is emotion, crying, screaming, pointing, anything that throws off the decorum of the courtroom.
Absolutely.
So then, like, I guess what kind of things make it more likely for people to win a case? Like, is it like, I guess, like, not putting emotion into it, and I'm sure it's like a bunch more stuff.
Oh, there's a lot. Yeah. There's, in fact, on Gavel, I have 70 videos, but no, I'm kidding. That's my little sales pitch. No, I mean, there are a lot of things that go, there are a lot of moving parts to every case. Okay. And it's everything from what's written in the lawsuit itself, right? The complaint, at least in Georgia, has to allege certain facts. You have to put enough detail in your lawsuit to actually show the judge what you're talking about, right? What the issue is. There's issues with timing, right? Make sure that the answer is filed on time. If it's not, you could get a default judgment if you're the defendant, meaning you could lose just because you didn't submit the right document. Right? You could show up to court, but because you didn't submit the right document, you lose. And that goes with timeliness too. Not only did you not submit it, but let's say you submit it 20 days late, or you bring it with you to court and say, I thought I was supposed to file it here. A judge could say, I'm sorry, you were supposed to file it 60 days ago. And that's too bad. So there's a lot of, not only is the emotional piece a piece to it for sure, but there are procedural rules that must be followed. And it's not an intent. I don't want any of your listeners to be scared or intimidated or think it's not something they can do. I mean, people have been doing small claims cases without attorneys for centuries, right? Or decades. This is not a new process. It's not a new court. It's not a new system. It's just that there's a lot of pieces to it that I don't want people to fall through the cracks. And it happens all the time. It doesn't happen to everybody, right? I mean, like, there are a lot of people probably listening to you going, I did this myself. It was no problem. And I won, right? Number one, it doesn't mean you're going to win next time.
Yeah.
Number two, though, that happens. Of course it does. Somebody wins, someone loses, right? Like, it's not like you can't go to court without help.
It's only like a 50-50 chance.
Whatever it is. Exactly. That's right, Jess. I mean, whatever it is, but I just hate seeing people lose cases that they should win because they just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that happens. It happens a lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think education is so important. Kind of going back to the course that you had set up, I think it's so important to know how to conduct yourself in the courtroom. Because I've never been to court for a small claims, but I've been there because I didn't know that it was illegal where I was for this cop had pulled somebody else over, and I just drove past. I wasn't even speeding, but I was supposed to get in another lane, and I had no clue. The guy, I guess, finished up giving this guy a ticket and then chased me down, and I got a ticket. So I had to go to court for it too, which I was like, man, can I just pay it? But I couldn't pay it. I had to go to court, and I went to court. And my mom used to watch like all those like court shows, like Law and Order. I never used to watch them at all, but I went, and it was the most hilarious thing because I thought that I would just get up there and I would be, I don't know what would happen, but I thought it was simple because I talk to people. I'm not, that antisocial where I can't talk to people. The judge asked me, how do I plead? And I was like, how do I what? Like, how do you plead? And like, I didn't know what was going on. And the judge was like upset, but he knew that I was young. So he was trying to be patient with me. So he told me to go out in the hallway and like do something. And then I think an attorney walked up and he was like, yeah, man, you got destroyed in there. Like, if you want me to help you out, like, if you can pay me like $200 right now, I'll help you out. So I ended up having to go to the ATM, pay this guy, and then go back into the courtroom. Literally, he said like something for like 2 minutes, and then like the whole thing got dropped. And it was like, wow, this is a lot harder than I thought it was for some people. So I think whoever's listening to this should definitely consider taking your course, because it's just, if you haven't been in that situation, you don't really know how it might go. And I think education is very important in this subject matter for sure.
I mean, it's so true. It's very much one of those you don't know what you don't know kind of things. Yeah. And whether you take the Gavel course or not, I strongly suggest that anybody who is dealing with a potential dispute or even just wants to learn, right? We pay taxes to help fund this court system. So, if you're curious about how it works and you don't even have a case, you just want to like learn a little bit, whether you take my program or not, do some research, spend some time, right? Treat your case like a term paper back in school, because it could be the difference in an $8,000 judgment or a $0 judgment. Yeah. Because you didn't take the time to treat your case seriously. So it's something that I think a lot of people, even if they don't take the course, even if they think they can do it themselves, totally cool. I'm fine with that. I get that. But I would strongly suggest that you take some time to learn it, so you don't just think, oh, I can do this myself. You go fill out the form, walk into the courtroom, and just start spewing out whatever comes to your mind. And you do, like, you can win anyway. Like I said before, it's not required, but I think it's important that people treat cases seriously. And too many people don't. Too many people think it's a shoe-in. It's like, picking up a basketball and dunking on a 4-foot hoop. Yeah. Right. It's not. I mean, treat it like a 10-foot hoop, and you got to practice a little bit.
Yeah. And plus a few $1,000s for the average person. That's a lot of money, in a world where a lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck, that could be like half of your savings, if not more. So it's like, you should definitely want to strengthen your chances. One of the questions I wanted to ask was, what are some tips that you can give, maybe particularly self-employed people or small business owners, to where they can avoid getting into these different types of small claims cases? Because I even though I never had one, I almost had one, and it was just something that's totally expected. I thought I was just going to call a couple offices and, all of them were going to be able to help really well, but it kind of took some research, and it's like, it's something that you never really expect for it to happen, but it can. So what are some of the things you tell people to help them avoid these different situations?
So I love that question, because a lot of business owners don't realize that, at least here in Georgia and in most states, and I can't vouch for everyone, I haven't finished the research, but in most states, and definitely in Georgia, businesses can go to small claims court without an attorney. And it's the only court where they can do that. In state or superior, the bigger courts, a business has to be represented by an attorney. In fact, I think in California, I'm going to get myself in trouble if I'm wrong here, but I think California, you're not allowed to have an attorney in small claims court. So, here in Georgia, you're allowed to if you want to. And a lot of businesses overspend on that because they think, look, I'm a business. I mean, you guys know running a business costs money, and vendors for people complain about their cable bill for their house. Like, try getting cable internet for your business. It's much more expensive. Like everything is. When you flip the switch on the website and you click business options, it feels like they add an extra zero, right? Right. So, but it's like, but business owners, if you've run your business long enough, you expect that. You just know there's a cost to doing business. Famous quote, right? That everybody says, well, it's a lot. There's a lot of cost to doing a business. Right. But one of the things that there doesn't have to be, at least here in Georgia, is the cost of an attorney in small claims court. And to jump off on that another level, you don't even have to have the owner go, right? So let's say you got a business where the owner is a remote business owner, or just doesn't want to, or has other things on his or her plate besides going to court. It's not best use of the owner's time. The owner can send a full-time employee on the business's behalf to represent the business. So, word of advice to business owners specifically, think about a full-time employee that you would designate as your court representative. Same as you would, I'm trying to think of another, a building, right? Our office building, my office building at least, you have to designate like I don't know what they call it, maybe like a fire marshal or something, a fire person for each office that wears like the vest that's all reflective and all that stuff. And the fire person in your office makes sure that everybody's out and like controls your office, right? Yeah. The same thing you should do for court. If you're a business owner, you should designate a court representative, somebody that anytime you get a letter demanding a settlement, anytime you get a lawsuit, anytime you're considering filing a lawsuit, that all goes to your in-house full-time, whoever it is, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be a particular job description. It just whoever's full-time that you think could handle that. So that I would absolutely encourage every business owner to do so that they're ready if it happens. I mean, you do enough business. Here's the other piece. If your business grows enough and you have enough customers or you have enough business in your business, you're going to get hit with some issues. It's going to happen at some point, right? Like very few people have big business or have grown a big business, an entrepreneur that's grown a big business that has never faced a legal issue in their career, right? So be ready for it because it will happen. And it's almost a compliment. Like when I get calls from clients and I say, well, you know what, how many, like I represent a lot of car dealers and that's why they have a lot of small claims cases. And I'll say, how many cars do you sell in a month? And they'll tell me. And sometimes when I hear something like 100 cars in a month, I go, man, this is a small cost of doing business for you, right? Like this is not, congratulations.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. What a compliment. You sell so many cars. You finally found somebody that's upset. You know what I mean? Like, whoa,
that's true though.
You know what I mean? Like I mean, nobody treats lawsuits as a compliment, and I say that somewhat in jest, but it's true. If you build your business big enough, it's going to happen.
Absolutely. So a question that I just thought of is like, how is it handled because you brought up like the remote owners. So how is it handled in court, I guess, when there are parties that are like, maybe one's in California and one is in Georgia? Like, which court are you supposed to go to? Like, how does that kind of work?
So that's an awesome question. And this is where I give the lawyer disclaimer of you should talk to a lawyer in your state if you have that question. Because the truth is it's different in every state. Here in Georgia, and I should even caveat that further, it depends on the type of case you have. So like, for example, here in Georgia, generally speaking, the case gets filed in the county where the defendant resides. Okay, that's the like legal mumbo jumbo. And what that really means is whoever is being sued, that's the defendant, wherever they live, if they're an individual, so where their home, their apartment, their whatever, wherever they live, that county. If they're a business, then it's wherever they have, and this is where it gets like multiple podcasts of complicated, but it's generally wherever their principal place of business is. So like a headquarters, let's say, or an office, or where their registered agent is. And so businesses have to have something called a registered agent, which is a person that is, or a physical address, not a PO box, at least again, Georgia, right? I'm a Georgia attorney, so I'm spouting off Georgia law here, but it has to be a physical location where somebody is present to accept service on behalf of the business. So if there's a lawsuit filed, if there's other documents that have to be, let's say IRS documents or other federal documents or things or state documents, it can't just be a box at a UPS store. It has to be a physical address. So generally speaking, it's wherever the defendant is, if that's an individual or a business, but there's a whole host of other like one-off situations where it could be in a different place. Like if there's a breach of contract, it could be where there's where the business, I'm trying to think of this where I won't bore the living, out of your listeners, but let's just say it this way. There's a lot of different answers to that question. And it really does depend on the type of case and the state that you live in if you're pursuing a case. And the other thing to keep in mind too, on that topic is if you are a defendant, right? If you're being sued and it's filed in the wrong place, then that's a big problem for the plaintiff. So if you know that, look, I'm in Fulton County, Georgia, that's where I live, and the case was filed in, I'm just going to use Georgia again, but it was in Gwinnett County, Georgia, and I speak to a lawyer or I do my research and I learned that Fulton was the right place, then you can try and dismiss the case out of Gwinnett, right? And win as the defendant because the plaintiff screwed up. So this is another one of those kind of procedural things that it's important to know, because you don't want to mess it up and lose your case because you just didn't know the right place to do it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Mm-hmm. That'd be awesome from, the standpoint of the person being sued if it was filed in the wrong place.
Yeah, it's great. So you imagine a scenario, right, where you show up to court, you're all ready for your trial, you're the plaintiff, and you're all excited, you've prepared, you've done all, you've got your evidence in line, and the defendant shows up and says, Your Honor, I live in Fulton County and this was filed in the wrong place. And the judge says, do you have a power bill or a utility or your driver's license? Can you prove to me you live in Fulton County? And the defendant shows it. And the judge says, well, plaintiff, you got two choices. We can either dismiss the case or we can transfer it to Fulton County, but I'm not giving you an answer today because you're in the wrong place. Plaintiff gets in their car and goes, "Arr!" You know what I mean? Like, oh, it's so frustrating. And then you got to do it all over again.
Yeah.
And this kind of stuff happens. And then you go, oh, they're just playing the system, right? They're just, you know what I'm talking about, that excuse, right? Oh, they just don't want to pay. They just don't want to pay and they're playing this. Well, no, they're not. There are rules to the system. Yeah. And what they're doing is they're ensuring that the rules are followed. And so, that's for defendant. Doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on, you got to follow the rules.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So does your course cover both sides, like both parties?
It sure does. It sure does. Now, keep in mind, the course right now is limited to Georgia. It would provide plenty of information that would be applicable to other states. Mm-hmm. So if you have listeners in Kentucky or Illinois or Iowa or Nevada or California, there's bits and pieces, but I don't pretend to know, right, what is applicable and what isn't applicable and how, one piece works or doesn't in a different state.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want people in Idaho taking my course and then walking into court and realizing everything is different in their state, and they're going, oh my gosh, what did I just do, right? What kind of money did I just waste on the program? But the goal is to get this thing out nationally, and I'm working actually right now on a YouTube series that's a much lighter, much more light version of the program that's going to be free, that is more applicable to everybody. Just kind of the basics of a small claims process.
That's awesome.
That's really, really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So we've went over so much in this podcast episode. What is one of the number one takeaways you would like somebody to get from listening to this?
Take your disputes. Can I do two? Because I talk too much, like every lawyer.
Absolutely.
One, take your disputes seriously. Okay. Two, actually three, because two is not enough. Two, be humble and leave your ego at the door. Okay. Remember that a resolution that you agree to with somebody else is almost always better than a resolution that's decided by a judge.
Yeah.
Okay. And number three, do your best to resolve your cases before pursuing or defending a lawsuit. It's almost always better. Even if you think you're in the right 100% and you're going, I'm not paying them a dime. Or even if you think you're in the right 100% and you say, I'm owed exactly $7,000. I'm not taking a cent less than that, right? Think about why we have things called compromise, and that the benefit to a compromise is certainty, and it ends a dispute and you can move on without having to go through the litigation process. It may not be the way you do it, and it may not be the end. You may not get to a compromise, but entertain one. It's worth it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
There was actually one time where we were in a situation where we could have went to a small claims court, and the guy that I was talking to was like, hey, I think I should just send a letter to this guy and scare the crap out of him and see if he sends the money back. Because if we go to court, I'm pretty sure I can get the money, but you're going to end up netting less of the money that I get back if we actually go to court. So it was like, I think the claim was about $20,000 if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. And to have him send a letter out, I think it was like $1,500 or something like that. So even though I wouldn't net the whole 20, that's still a lot of money that I would be getting back. But if we had to went to court, I think I would only be netting, it was like less than, 15,000 or something like that, like significantly less.
Yeah. And Joseph, for your listeners too, on bouncing off of that, remember that what you get in court is a piece of paper, right? You get a judgment from the judge. Let's say you win your court case.
Yeah.
You get a sheet of paper that says how much money you are entitled to. There's no suitcase of money at the courtroom that they just hand you if you win. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
So then you have to go collect. And collection, I've got videos on that in my program too, but collection is not the simplest thing to do, to turn a judgment into money. And so, if you are going through the potential of settlement and compromise before filing the lawsuit, or even after, right? Lawsuits filed. And some courts make you go to a formal mediation, which I talk about too, before your trial. And if you have the opportunity to resolve your case in mediation, you know with more certainty that you're going to get money. And if you win at court and you get a sheet of paper, there's no guarantee that that sheet of paper ever turns into cash.
Yeah, and that's crazy.
That sucks.
We got really that really sucks.
It does suck. I mean, I shouldn't laugh. I mean, people deal with it every day, but it's terrible. It's not something folks think about when they think about pursuing their case in court. That doesn't mean you're going to get paid.
We definitely got lucky from that standpoint. So you're on the Abundant Culture podcast, and we feel the need to ask this question to everyone who comes on because we always get really unique and interesting answers. And that question is whether it be in your business, your personal life, your spiritual life, whatever you want to talk about, how do you spread abundance to the people around you?
Oh man, that's a loaded question. So that's like a lawyer question where there's no right answer. It depends. I do it by two things that I really prioritize. One is helping people. Like I said before, that's the only reason I'm doing what I'm doing. Okay. This online course on a per sale basis is not my ticket to retirement, right? If we really think about it. Okay. It's not. One sale is not going to do me any real good. I lose money if all I do is sell one course. I'm doing it to help people because a lot of people need help. And not only that, I do it with a smile on my face, right? Like it's so important to me. That comes through in audio. It comes through for sure in video. It comes through in meeting people, relationships. It's not, sure, I'll share a lot of information, right? We've talked on this podcast a whole lot of different things about small claims court, right? And a lot of them are in my video, but good for your listeners. They're getting it all for free. That's awesome, right? I'm happy to share the information if it can help people, but I want to make sure I'm doing it with a smile because I think people appreciate that. You want to work with somebody who's smiling. You want to be around somebody who's smiling, who's happy. You want to know people that are smiling and happy. It just changes everything in not only my life, but in the folks that I talk to and meet with. And even you and I, as we're talking about this and going through this recording, smiling it makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's actually funny that you say that because like when you first came on a podcast, I was like, he doesn't strike me as like this super, serious kind of uptight type of attorney. And it made me think about a time where I met another attorney not too long ago. And he was a good guy from an intention standpoint, like he wanted to help. But if you just look at him, there's like no way to tell because it looks like he hates his life. It looks like he hates your life. He does not want to be there.
Man, I'll tell you, Joseph, real quickly. I have a family. Thank God. I have an amazing wife. I have two incredible kids. I have a dog that's aging, but she's wonderful. And I go home to them every day. Right. And so like, what good is it to go home miserable? You know what I mean? Like I talk to lawyers all the time on other sides of cases and at networking functions or pre-COVID networking, whatever.
Yeah.
And they just, you're like, oh, like that person has to go home at the end of the day. How do they, do they just flip a switch when they go home and they're nice and happy and smiling and just during the day that, like you said, they're just, it's not somebody you want to work with.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I treat life and how I treat my relationships is that I've got a home to go home to. I've got a family to go home to, and I want them to be proud of me. I want to be proud of myself, and I want everyone around me to be happy. I really genuinely do.
That is awesome.
So for the person, maybe they definitely know that they need your course because they're going through something right now, or maybe they want you on their podcast, whatever the case may be. How does that person get into contact with either you or your team?
Sure. So they can reach out to me directly. So the website for the Gavel program is www.gavel.legal. That's GAVEL.legal. My email address is Steven, STEVEN @gavel.legal. I'm happy to talk to really anybody. I'm an open book. And just a heads up for your listeners, I know 2020 has been tough. I mean, there are all those memes and all that business and whatever going around. Like, it's just what a weird year, right?
Yeah.
So from now until the end of the year, if you use the promo code Gavel 2020, you'll get half off what we call the small claims experience, which includes all the videos from start to finish. And your listeners are welcome to use that, hoping at least that if you launch this or this episode after 2020 into 2021, I'll make a new code just for your listeners that you can put in the show notes for the next, let's say, 2 months after you launch.
Awesome.
Thank
that sounds
you.
great.
That's much appreciated.
So thank you again, Stephen, so much for coming onto the podcast, giving us a wealth of knowledge, because we didn't know a lot of this stuff. I'm sure our listeners didn't know a lot. So this was super duper helpful. And we really, truly appreciate you coming onto the podcast.
You bet, guys. Thanks again for having me. It was fun. It's really fun.
Glad you enjoyed it. So that's all we have for today, folks. I hope you got as much value out of this as we did. Keep in mind, the only way we can improve is through constructive feedback. So remember to rate and review this episode. Also, you are not the only person that needs to know this super valuable information. So be sure to subscribe and share as well. Stay tuned for the next episode. And remember to always spread abundance. Peace.